Welcome to Fritz, your one-stop for news, current events, and all forms of entertainment relating to the paranormal, the supernatural, the Fortean, and things that go bump in the night, all packaged and presented in the form of know-nothing, know-it-alls entertaining the unknown. Tonight we are going to be dealing with campfire tales. There's a lot going on in this country, and we want everyone to focus on protesting, being happy if they feel, and also being entertained. So we are there in solidarity with you. If you are protesting, please be safe. Don't break laws, don't break property, don't break hearts, don't break people. Coming up, this is a tale from Mandaddy. This is Huska Castle, and exactly why it's kind of a head-scratching conundrum of a mystery.
Have any of you ever heard of Huska Castle?
Nope.
No.
Well, I can tell, obviously, because this bottomless pit isn't bringing you terror and dread, because...
Should it?
It should. Let me tell you a story. Huska Castle is a Gothic castle located 29 miles north of Prague in the Czech Republic. It was built in the first half of the 13th century, probably on the orders of ruler Ottokar II of Bohemia, possibly as an administrative center to manage his many estates. Now, on first look, there are a few odd things. First of all, it is located away from all trade routes, and it's very secluded, tucked far away in a forested area. It also lacked many normal amenities, such as running water or even a kitchen. And also, most of the windows looking out were actually fake and have solid walls behind the faux windows.
All right, starting to get spooky.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
also lacking the typical fortifications that a castle at the time would have to protect it from outside attackers. In fact, once inside the courtyard, it becomes apparent that the castle was not formed to keep attackers out, but to keep occupants in.
Like Castle, California.
What? It was like, what?
Like Castle, California.
Because you can check out, but you can never leave.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I see where you're
Is that like the
going.
Hotel California?
Now, you see, Casa Huska was built in that particular location for a very good reason. To cover up a seemingly bottomless pit
What?
Oh, no.
that many claim to be an entrance to hell itself.
You have to be kidding me.
I wish I was.
So, a cave to hell.
A huge cave to hell
Where you just fall.
where you just go until you get into hell.
Until
and
you're
then,
there.
well, it probably gets a little interesting. Let me continue. For years, locals have reported strange sightings and occurrences. Villagers claim that at night, strange half-human, half-animal creatures with bat wings would fly out of the hole and terrorize local towns. It got to the point that local residents would never leave their houses after dark for fear of being attacked by these winged creatures. Even local officials decided to look into this supposed bottomless pit, and they took criminals that were sentenced to death and gave them a choice: hanging, or they could jump into the hole and see if they could crawl out.
Oof.
If they could, they were free. No one ever returned.
How many people did they get with the noose or pit?
I'm guessing they tossed in a few before someone said, I'm not taking the pit route.
I can see that. Like, did the other guys have to watch the first pit guy jump in and go,
I'm hoping they kept it away and just said, well, we're going to tell you what's up until later.
Exactly.
We're not really going to
we're not
going to
tell
watch
you
the whole
who chose
process.
what.
There's always that one guy who's like, all right, and then he just turns around and he goes, mail my fingernail clippings back to my mother, and then he just goes, I regret nothing, and just jumps straight into the hole.
He just says, yeah, I watch a lot of ancient Czech Republic American Ninja. I got this. Forearms all day, brah.
Now, then they got smart, which is a relative term at this point. Then they took a prisoner and they tied a rope around his waist and lowered him into the pit.
Creepy.
Classic Elmer Fudd style discovery of the bottomless pit.
He's just trying to get that rabbit.
I hate you guys.
I knew he had it too. I knew he was going to go for it. All right.
Now, within minutes, he began to scream violently and thrash about and started smashing into the walls of the pit as if he was fighting some assailant.
Oh my God.
When they hauled him out of the pit, his hair had turned completely white, and witnesses say that he looked like he had aged almost 30 years.
Oh my God.
He was unable to speak coherently and was placed in a mental institution, where he died 2 days later of unknown causes.
They didn't set him free after dangling him in the pit?
He couldn't even take care of himself.
This is for his own health.
He
Okay.
died from a
it's just-
short, unexplained illness, didn't
Oh, son of a bitch. Don't do that to me.
Whoa.
In a
You know how
place
close I am
with
to this
a
damn-
bottomless pit.
Stop it. This
Hold
pit
on.
is giving me
A bottomless
ideas.
pit.
Just stop it.
Now, the reason for that incident was why they built the castle. And it's why they put the castle's chapel directly over the pit. After its construction, it rarely had full-time occupants. And visitors to Hauska Castle have reported a number of disturbing encounters and experiences. In the chapel, people have reported hearing a chorus of screams coming from beneath the floor, and the sound of claws scraping along underneath the floor. Caretakers of the building have reported seeing a headless body that wanders through the courtyard with blood endlessly gushing from its neck.
Ugh, like you
Of
do.
course. Yeah, exactly.
Like you do.
Like some are wont to do.
That's just Fred.
That's what he does on the weekends. He just walks around with the blood in the neck.
You know, the ghost don't have a head on him, but it's got an infinite heart and blood supply. So it's even spookier.
Definitely comes out of nowhere.
Like they weren't denying physics enough. Now, in the grounds of the castle, multiple people have reported seeing a terrifying creature they say looks like a hybrid of a human, frog, and a bulldog.
I did not expect
A
that combination.
human, a frog, and a bulldog.
bulldog.
Just try to assemble that one into your mental camera.
I'm trying to
What
figure out
part
what
is what?
breed.
I know,
Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, I'm thinking, it's always got to be like human face, I'm guessing. Like,
Are we going English, American, French bulldog? Which kind of bulldog? Like how?
thank you.
Going with
It's hard- it's hard.
French,
This is a
French
hard-
bulldog, so he's really, really squat. He's really compact.
Yeah,
Let's let
very
the
definitely
Tulpamancer
stout.
take over here.
very-
Frog head and a human butt.
Still not as terrifying as bronies.
Eh.
Then there's the, quote, human chain.
Ooh.
Many people have reported looking into the courtyard and seeing dozens, if not hundreds, of people chained together, moving through the grounds while giant black dogs snarl and bite at their legs. These encounters would last several minutes, and witnesses report that the chained individuals were in various states of decay. Some were even carrying their own body parts, and some even carrying their own heads. One of the darkest presences is regularly seen in the hunting lodge. One night, Zanedna Verzalova and her husband were relaxing in the lodge. How anyone could relax in this place is completely beyond me.
Cup of blood?
Why,
Kick
yes, of
back,
course.
hear some chorus of screams, watch chained people wander around. Oh, relaxing.
Not a whole lot to do in the Czech Republic, man. Like,
This is true. I guess anything's
you got to take what you can get as far as entertainment goes.
So while they're in the lodge, they hear a loud thump behind them. They said it sounded like a body hitting the floor. Why not just let the bodies hit the floor?
Do the thing you want to. You
saw
want to
it.
do
I
it.
saw it. When they
I was so applauding you and not going that route. Here I am.
Restraint
The room
is
was
not
very
my
tense.
strong
I
point.
know, all of us were like,
Somebody do it. There it is.
Secretly, I was like,
Yeah.
no. But
Funny
awesome.
thing about that band, I didn't open for them in Tampa.
Oh, all right.
Now, when they turned around, they saw two featureless humanoid shadow figures. Zedna and her husband were frozen in fear as the shadowy figures approached them and whispered in their ears vague references to having recently killed young girls.
What?
That's bad.
ooh.
Not like a full blog post, just like little, totes killed young girls, LOL.
That's
Oh
not
my
like perks
God.
like chocolates on a pillow.
2 out of 10 would not attend again.
Not children friendly.
Unless they're dead. During World War II, Keep that whole intro. That's just
That will
brilliant.
all be gone. Don't
During
worry.
World War II, the Nazis took residence in the castles because, of course, they did. It was reported that they performed grisly experiments on humans and even experiments with the dark arts and attempts to open an interdimensional portal. A later investigation discovered 3 Nazi bodies buried in the courtyard. All 3 had been executed. So what does a Nazi have to do to piss off another Nazi so much that they have to be killed? Now, the castle still stands and even has an active website. So it's still possible to this day to spend a night in a Gothic castle positioned above the entrance to hell.
You guys want to go?
You're listening to Real Radio 104.1.
Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Welcome back to Fort Fritz, right here on Real Radio 104.1. I am Fritz. This next story comes to us courtesy of Kaz. His story on the curse of the Royal Nepalese family. The curse of the Royal Nepalese family. You can listen to this story if you want to on the iHeartRadio app. Just download it. It's absolutely free and search Royal Nepalese Family Curse.
Clearly, you guys have never heard of the Nepalese royal family curse.
I have.
No, not at all.
No. And it actually just came, it was 2001, so that was 17 years ago. That's a long time ago.
That's a long time ago. In
17
2018
years
terms.
since 2001.
Yeah.
According to the legend, about 200 years ago, Prithvi Narayan Shah was the initial founder of the Nepalese royal dynasty, the royal kingdom. He started by making conquest of smaller areas around him and kind of developing, how you do.
Right.
You take over the local areas.
And then you look at your neighbor's plot and you go, I can kill my neighbor.
Well, first you got to be like, hey, if I get into some beef, you got my back?
Yeah. Are you cool?
And the
with
guy's
that?
like, nah. You're like, well, I'll kick your ass. Okay, yeah, fine, all right. And that's how you start a kingdom. You get everyone to say, I got your back. So everyone said that they had his back, and this guy was the king, quote unquote, for a little while, and he was walking through the forest one day. He came across a man named...
The king walked back then?
Oh, yeah. The king was walking through the woods one day, and he came across a holy man, a yogi named Goraknath. Goraknath.
Goraknath.
And this man was believed to have supernatural powers. He was like kind of a mystic forest man of the area.
Forest yogi.
About 200 years ago. So the king offered this man a piece of curd. The man accepted it. Goraknath.
Was it bean curd like tofu? Or
We're
was
going to go
it
with
something?
cheese.
I was
'cause it fits
actually wondering that.
It fits
Thank you.
It's probably bean, honestly, if we're thinking about it.
You don't
but
know.
Let's go cheese. It says curd.
It's a Wisconsin cheese curd.
It's a curd. It's an
Like a
ancient
curd.
curd
Oh, the
from
squeaky-
200 years ago.
the squeaky ones?
Use your imagination. He offers the man the curd. The man takes the curd, chews it up in his
Offered the man the curd is
The
the
guy-
favorite sentence I've ever heard.
Man one goes, you want the curd? Man two goes, oh,
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
I
yeah,
want
yeah,
the
yeah,
curd.
Hook me up with
yeah.
that curd, brother.
So man two takes the curd. He takes the curd, he chews it up, and he says, I'm going to spit this back out. I want you to catch it in your mouth and eat it.
What?
To the king.
Are they in a frat? This is like
Got him!
like
Frat boys.
Hellenistic row. Is it?
He offered to spank him, and then he made him pay him for it.
Carry a Bing cherry in his butt for 12 meters.
That sounds
Drink
really
a whole handle in 5
specific.
minutes?
So he spits the curd out, and the king refuses. The king says, no, that's gross as shit. I'm not in on that.
Did it just hit him in the face? Or
It
did he
actually,
dodge it?
no. It specifies the curd dribbled onto the king's 10 toes. He spit it out
All
onto
10.
his feet.
That was just a long...
Slid across all of them.
It should have just hit 1 or 2 toes. It didn't have to hit all 10.
So he was the king was repulsed by this, right? But the yogi was like, you know what? I curse you. I
Why?
curse you because he had the audacity to refuse the chewed up curd from a forest man.
You, Forest Yogi.
You guys are prudes, all right? The amount
Why
of
would
weird
you
shit you put in your
looked at me
mouth.
and you pointed at me.
The amount of weird you guys put in your mouths, and
How
you're gonna
dare
tell
you.
me that like a little bit of cheese in some weird like yogi's mouth is like way too weird for you.
That you've never met before.
Yeah, no.
This man is the only one that's earned my respect.
Thank you.
Stranger danger.
We're
200
talking-
years ago, you're safe.
Unbelievable.
All right, cheese from another man's mouth, safest thing you can eat.
You're saying,
That sounds like a thing you'd say. Like cheese from another man's mouth.
let me
Like
just,
cheese from another man's
You
mouth.
ignore this,
So
you
go
have no
the
water.
days of our lives.
You must accept this truth. Like cheese from another man's mouth.
let me just posit this, okay?
infectious diseases are communicable from the mouth. So basically, you
In the
get
butt.
everything. You get the entire profile of this man and his current infections spitting onto.
He's a holy man. He's a yogi.
You're goddamn right I am.
Takes care of himself.
That does. There's no scientific
No,
backing
there's-
in what you just
no.
said. There.
This is a natural person, and they are eating some
Anyway.
cheese, and they're offering it
I've
to him
seen
in
pictures
their
of
own
like
special
ancient
way.
yogis, and I never thought, wow, they got great teeth.
So he curses the king. He curses the king. He says, in 10 years, your entire dynasty will fall apart. Your family will fall apart. I curse you. And the king, realistically, understandably, was like, that's a little harsh. That's a little much.
Wow,
That seems a
no
little
chill,
much.
man.
Maybe give me, if you were going to let me know ahead of time, then I might have done it.
Like,
I didn't
eat
know,
this cheese
I didn't know
or this happens.
Right. I didn't know that was what was at stake.
He
So
goes-
anyway.
he goes, "Do I get one mulligan?"
Can I get
Leave my forest, he said with a spray of curd. So the king was like, all right, well, f it. So he leaves. So 10 generations.
So cheese.
Exactly. So 10 generations pass, but the 9th and 10th are in
Flux?
they are alive at the same time. The king was the 9th generation, King Birendra. His queen was Aishwara, and his son was Prince Dipendra.
They had nice little.
Dipendra.
From the land of the easy names.
Dhirendra. I'm sure I'm butchering it. Obviously, as we do on Fort Fritz, I don't speak Nepalese or whatever it is that
You're
they
so f***ing uncultured.
I know. I'm
Likewise.
sorry. So the king and his son, the prince, are both very well liked. They're both extremely popular members of the royal family. They are well educated. They're public figures. And then tragedy strikes in 2001. Prince Dipendra, depending upon how you're
That's pronouncing it.
It's a snipe.
Enters the Narahanti royal palace in the Nepalese monarchy and murders 10 members of his family and wounds 5 others.
Damn.
During a party, which is apparently a monthly thing. They party monthly, which is
just
badass.
monthly
It's
party.
like how they do it in
That's
the
what
Monthly
they call
murder
it.
party.
Yeah.
Like just like a stabbing, like with a knife or
with guns.
Okay.
Go with several guns.
Okay.
Let's put it right here as the first point of like mystery. 4 large guns. All right, 3 large guns and 1 handgun. Let's say. So this is a prince of a royal family, well liked, intelligent, educated,
And then 10 members of this family
murdered
murdered.
in a party.
And the sad thing is that they would have been murdered if more of them had guns. That's
So it's interesting that you bring that up because there's significant stories about the security detail on staff that night. This is the Nepalese royal family. There were other dudes with guns there that were supposed to keep the other because they have problems with the Maoists. There's issues, there's political turmoil at the time, right? The security detail on staff that night were trained members of the military. These men were the Secret Service of the Nepalese like royal family, right? Surrounded by these people, the man managed to kill King Birendra, Queen Aishwara, Prince Nirajan, Princess Shruti, his only sister, Princess Shanti, Princess Sharanda. So these are other siblings of the other members of the family. I guess they get royal titles. Kumar Kadaga and Princess Jayanti, as well as Prince Dipendra himself, because he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound following the attack, is what we'll say. So Dipendra died essentially 3 days later. He was in a coma. He was crowned king during that time.
Wow.
During the 3 days that he was in a coma by his uncle, Gyanendra.
Was it just like a ceremonial, you're now king and
Yes.
you're probably going to die kind of thing?
So his uncle, released the official story from the Nepalese royal family saying that an automatic weapon was discharged.
Automatic weapon, Jesus.
An automatic weapon was discharged accidentally at a party, and that several members were dead, and that turmoil was happening, and Gyendra, the uncle, was going to see us through this, right? So he had the dying prince / assailant crowned king, But then conspicuously, the royal doctor was barred from attending Prince Dipendra's bedside at the hospital for 3 days. This man was supposed to attend him medically to resuscitate him or to give him treatment for gunshot wounds and etc. It was hospital staff only, 3 days. He was pronounced dead after the third day, immediately rushed from the hospital to a funeral pyre. No autopsy.
A funeral pyre?
No.
They burned his ass in 2001?
It's Nepalese royal family, man. That's how they do.
That doesn't explain what I just said.
They probably burn people in Nepal.
Yeah.
Probably.
Old Dipendra. He's dependable.
Very dependable.
Until he massacred his whole family. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
So, a two-man committee comprising of several other men who I'm going to butcher their names, so I won't even bother, but they're like representative of the Justice Department in Nepal, carried out a week-long investigation into the massacre. The investigation concluded, after interviewing more than 100 people, including eyewitnesses and palace officials, that Dipendra had carried out the massacre. A large number of critics, Nepalese, both inside of Nepal and abroad, disputed the official report because many facts reported by the investigation seemed to contradict each other. One sticking, I guess, eyewitness quote was, of the very popular Dipendra, he can give up the throne for his sake of love, but he can never do this kind of thing. So one of the stories put forward of why he would have done this was that he intended to marry a woman who was of unsavory, I guess, quality to the royal family.
A widower or...
No, she was like royalty, but she wasn't the right kind of royalty. She was like from a disputing clan.
Or caste.
Yeah. That had like relatives in another country and stuff. It wasn't as like royal as she should have been. She wasn't like perfect. But he was like, you know what? I don't care. There was a rich family, but it wasn't like royalty, like appropriate for him to marry. So he said, I don't care. I want to marry her anyway. And they told him, well, you're going to give up the throne if you do that. You're going to have to do that as a regular person.
They would have to abdicate the
correct.
The throne.
So that was kind of the contention point, and that's what they pinned it on. They said, okay, well, he was upset because he wasn't able to marry this woman, and that quote came out from that person. He can give up the throne for his sake of love, but he can never do this kind of thing. Meaning that several people who knew him.
So, are you saying he could do anything for love?
But he won't do that.
But he won't do that.
Oh, jeez.
He won't do that with several guns at his own family's party. So the overall conception of him was that this was a man who wouldn't do something like this, right? Like he would have rather have like just forsaken everything than kill his entire family.
So people say it's got to be a curse.
Bullshit. People say it's bullshit, first of all. So there are several, I guess, interpretations of what happened, but you got to look at like who benefits, right? Like whenever something like this happens, everyone in the line of succession was wiped out except for this uncle, Gayendran. Again, I'm sorry, the guy was a scumbag, so I don't care if I mispronounce his name. But anyway, he
deserved it.
Yeah, that guy.
Several
Had it coming. Totally got it coming.
Several inconsistencies with the report of what happened that night. First of all, the guy was a well-to-do guy. How did he know how to operate it was like a SPAS 12-gauge automatic shotgun,
Jesus.
an HK MP5 submachine gun, Glocks, and all this other.
Heavy
While
gear.
there's security, a full security detail standing around
Inside job.
that would allow this 10 people to be massacred inside of this party, right? So another inconsistency was he eventually succumbed to his wounds 3 days later due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but it was on the wrong side. It was one of those wrong side things. He was right-handed. It was on the left side of his head.
Oh, so
and
he
there
was
were two
killed, you think?
bullets.
Oh, weird.
According to eyewitnesses, there were 2 holes in the side of his head, but again, unable to be verified due to the fact that they rushed his body immediately from after barring the royal doctor from seeing him for 3 days, immediately to a funeral pyre, no autopsy. Sounds like a setup, right? So people think it was due to the fact that India was putting pressure at the time. We're going to get busted for this. India was putting pressure on the time of the Nepalese government to take defense contracts, to be like, hey, we're going to defend you, buy our defense stuff. And the king of Nepal was like, we don't need your I'm going to buy some stuff from China. And then they basically the eyewitnesses around the place say that the hallmarks of what the operation looked like looked very similar to the Indian research and analysis wing. They're basically the Indian CIA. Had some hand in essentially performing what would be a coup, right?
Yeah.
So,
So,
MI6.
right. They created this weird narrative of this man killing his whole family due to love or whatever, and then they put him essentially out of the way, and they have this uncle who is now the king of Nepal, the last in the line of succession, and he reigns, quote unquote, for 5 years until finally the public of Nepal comes out and says, you know what, you're not the king. You have no royal blood. We want someone who's actually the royal line.
We can do that?
Well, Nepal did.
Yeah, Nepal did, not us.
Damn it.
You got balls like Nepal?
Nice.
Answer him, man, daddy.
I mean, I don't even have moves like Jagger, so I don't have balls like Nepal.
So they ended up basically instituting a republic. They said, you know what, you're not the king, and there is no more king. We're doing a monarch. We're doing away with the monarchy. We are going to have a republic now. And they switched. They are now a republic essentially in Nepal after the 2001 Nepalese massacre. 5 years of the uncle reigning, and then in 2006 there was an official ousting of this man. Some say due to actually the fact that he refused to observe this very specific like religious ritual where they would go to offer prayer to what would be like the goddess of the state, almost like the one who watches over everything.
The president.
And he was making kind of a protest to the point that the monarchy had lost some of its teeth in that they had given a lot of power to parliament and stuff like that. So he was saying, well, I'm not even the king. I'm going to go to this thing as like a commoner, and I'll just show up whenever I want and give an offering. And everybody was like, it's the curse again. So if you think about it, it's the guy who got killed, the king, was the 9th. The prince who, quote unquote, shot himself on the wrong side of his head with 2 bullets was the 10th, which would have fulfilled the curse of Garank. And then the 11th was this guy who technically was never king and was ousted. And that's the end of the Nepalese monarchy. They are now a republic. They have like political parties and they vote and like that. And the curse of that man came true. So eat the cheese.
Eat the cheese.
Well,
Eat the cheese.
You are listening to Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Welcome back to Fort Fritz. We now go into La Llorona, the story from Angela, and it deals with a very scary woman who lost her children, and, well, she's an evil person now, and she's dead. She's coming back with a vengeance.
this looks like a river of tears.
It does look very sad.
Have you guys ever heard of La Llorona?
No.
No.
Let me tell you about her. La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, is a legendary ghost of Mexican folklore who causes misfortune for all who are near her or hear her. And her story teaches you to always take kindly to your kin.
How do you spell this?
L-A, and then L-L-O-R-O-N-A.
La
La
Llorona.
Llorona.
So lloror. Lloro? I'm like messing up the end of it.
Is to cry.
It's to cry. So it's the crying woman.
The crying symph.
Whoa, the
La
woman.
Llorona means the weeping woman.
The Weeping Shade.
No one is certain when this legend originated, but the common thread is that she is the spirit of a broken-hearted woman who drowned her own children and now spends an eternity looking for them in rivers, lakes, and streams. She roams from Mexico to South Texas, wailing into the heavens searching for her children and drowning other children she finds on her sad, infinite journey.
Oof. Rough.
Yeah.
Like, if I can't have mine, no one can have
No one
theirs.
can have any, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Pretty
rough.
much.
Ugh.
Maria was born into a poor peasant family in a small village in Mexico. She was captivating, said to be the most beautiful girl in the world. Poor and rich men of the area pined for her. During the day, she would work with her family, but at night she would drape herself in the finest white gowns and gallivant about the local fandangos, teasing all of the men.
But, like, teasing them, like, be like,
You can't get me.
like,
You bad boys at the Fandango!
At the fandango in my white gown, you can't touch me.
At the Fandango!
She never wanted to marry any of them. She thought herself to be so beautiful that she would only marry the most handsome man in the world.
Oh, so she's vain. She's that girl.
Finally, a handsome young ranchero visited her small town. He was wild and rich, and Maria thought he was just as beautiful as she was. She married him believing that she had found her one true love, and the only man worthy of her hand in marriage.
Wow.
They had 2 lovely daughters together, and Maria was so happy. But her husband did not enjoy his life with her. He thought he was better than Maria, as she came from a poor family in a tiny, humble village. He started leaving her for weeks and months at a time, womanizing, drinking, gambling. Whenever he returned, he barely spoke with Maria, only ever talking to their daughters. The last time he came back, Maria and her daughters were strolling the river when her husband rode in on a carriage. Sitting next to him was a young, elegant woman, most likely from money and just as beautiful as Maria.
That bastard.
As he approached them, he didn't even speak to Maria. He only spoke to his daughters, and then rode off with this new woman, never looking back. Maria went into a full fit of rage.
Yeah.
She was the most beautiful woman in the world, and how dare he leave her and only speak to their children. Out of pure anger and jealousy, Maria threw her children into the river and let them drown.
So he came back to their place, their residence,
Yes.
and refused to speak to Maria.
Just showed up with this chick and refused to talk to his wife.
Correct.
The side piece.
And he was already
Right.
starting
The
this.
side
like-
corn, if
Yes.
you will.
He was already starting this before.
So this is something that was long in the works.
Upon realizing what she had done, she tried to save them and reached her arms out as they disappeared into the water. She was inconsolable with grief and ran down the streets of the village wailing and crying at the loss of her children. And because Maria had always acted like she was better than everyone, no one consoled her.
Yeah.
This one
What
was,
does she think?
Right.
She was kind of a bitch.
Right.
And then she's the one who threw him in the river.
She did it.
So that I don't necessarily see as a negative, right? Like maybe it was just a test of strength. Like, you know, either like you can throw your kids like in the lake to see if they can swim, but then you get them out, like you don't let them drown. So that was rude.
She didn't think about it. Not
It
good
wasn't
planning.
well thought out.
She mourned her daughter for weeks. She didn't eat or drink, just stumbled down the riverbanks looking for her dead daughter's bodies. She became thin, like a walking skeleton. And eventually she died by the river where she killed her children.
Did she pine away? Like she was so emaciated, she just let
Correct.
herself go?
She languished.
Travelers saw her body and buried her along the water. Soon after her death, people began claiming they had seen her thin frame draped in a white gown walking along the river or even on the water, weeping and wailing, looking for her dead daughters. Some said she was turned away from heaven because of what she did and not allowed in until she found them. And no one called her Maria anymore. She was now La Llorona, the weeping woman.
Oh. Wait, was she wearing all white?
Yes.
Ah!
White gown.
It's spooky. I'm
It's spooky.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty spooky.
Super spooky. It's a super spooky outfit to pick. What's the spookiest color I could wear as a ghost?
White.
A white gown.
Because it means pure in most religions.
As years went by, La Llorona's spirit grew more evil. She started kidnapping children and drowning them in rivers, lakes, and streams. She would beg them for forgiveness like they were her own children before, taking them to a water grave in hopes that her deaths would take the place of her own daughters. Children growing up in the area were told not to misbehave or go outside at night, otherwise La Llorona would snatch them up and take their lives.
Is there like such a thing as like a ghost psychologist who could like help them work out their issues, like
Yeah,
therapy,
those
like
Medium.
a Dr. Phil
You ever
of
watch
the ghost
Medium?
world? No, but that's a TV show. That's
Yeah.
like, isn't there a real like someone there's like a real person who can do that?
Yes.
Jennifer Love Hewitt
Chip Coffee.
Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost.
There you
and
go.
Whoopi Goldberg.
I thought she was just like a medium. She couldn't really-
Exactly.
I mean, she like totally went out of her way to help the whole Patrick Swayze situation.
That's
so.
true. That's true.
She's also a notary public.
It seems like she should get paid very well, and I'm pretty sure that ghosts don't have any money.
You're just richer for the experience.
There's a story of a man named Epifanio Garcia who often argued with his parents when he was younger. After a heated argument, Epifanio and his brothers decided to leave their parents' house and took the horses and carriage. On their way, a woman appeared on the seat with them. She sat silently, and the boys, not sure what to do, decided to turn back home, not sure who this woman was or what she was. And she just whispered, "I will visit you again someday when you argue with your mother."
Jesus.
Gross.
Wow.
And vanished.
So this was something that was picked up while en route? These guys were like, they had their horse and carriage?
Yes, these three brothers got in some fight with their parents, left, and she showed up on the carriage with them. They believe she spared them because they turned around to go back to their mother and father.
Wow.
For years, her spirit has haunted the region with stories like this. Her weeps and wails echo across bodies of water as she searches for her dead daughters.
Wow, that even sounds scary.
And she visits those who do not treat their families well. To this day, many children who have grown up in the Mexican South Texas area say that their parents used to warn them, "You better go to sleep or La Llorona will come into your room and take you away."
Creepy.
You're listening to Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Welcome back to Fort Fritz. Fritz here for the last segment, and we end with the Chase Vault of Barbados. This one very haunted, very spooky, and Nick Spry gets into this one. Let's check it out.
You've never heard about the Chase Vault?
Well, evidently not, because of all of us saying what?
The moving coffins of Barbados?
Okay.
So this story goes back to Barbados, obviously, in the Lesser Antilles, right above South America. It's a really tiny sovereign island nation. It's only about 21 miles long by 14 miles wide, and it was for over 300 years a British colony. And so this story goes into the middle of the Triangular Trade, where sugarcane plantations were making the country most of its money, and slavery was instituted. But in Austin, in Christchurch Parish Cemetery, along the seaboard side of Barbados' southern coast, a sunken crypt was built for someone named James Elliot in 1724. And it was sunken somewhat into the ground. It was constructed mainly from the compacted coral that makes up the foundation of most of the island, but it was reinforced.
A sunken crypt?
Yeah, a sunken
Like
crypt.
the
So
ones
you
in like New Orleans?
basically, so
Which
you
is
had
what?
to like walk down a flight of stairs to go into the crypt, which was sunken underground, and it was compacted out of this coral that makes up like most of the island, limestone, and then it was reinforced
Coquino.
with concrete about 2 feet thick, and they would seal it off with this marble slab of blue marble that said it was so large that it took about 6 or 7 men to move it in order to close it off.
Wow.
But for about 80 years, nobody inhabited this crypt. And eventually, when the property was sold in 1808 to the wealthy Colonel Thomas Chase, he purchased the tomb as a family burial plot. And there was one body interred in there the previous year. It was Thomasina Goddard, and she had been a family friend of the family that owned the crypt before they sold it to Thomas Chase. But he decided not to remove her body and to leave it there. But it
Probably
wouldn't be
smart.
long.
Yeah. Nobody likes moving bodies.
Dead body, stay where the dead body want to stay.
Yeah, I'm not touching that.
But Goddard's remains were put in a simple wooden coffin inside of the vault. The Chase family was known locally for their violent and cruel treatment of their slaves on their properties. Even though slavery had been abolished the previous year, the institution would not be dismantled for another several years. Particularly Thomas, the patriarch of the family, he was known for his rabid abuse of his family and his slaves. This plays in later on into the story. Almost immediately after he purchased the burial plot, tragedy struck the Chase family with the death of their 2-year-old daughter, Mary Ann Marie Chase, on February 22nd, 1808. Her remains were placed in a heavy, solid coffin made of lead, and when the marble slab was removed to inter her remains, it was noted that Teresa Goddard's wooden casket was there undisturbed and nothing was strange or it appeared to be totally normal, and the slab was replaced and resealed. And
Why are you telling us that a coffin was unmoved?
That's scary as hell.
Well,
The thing just sat there
Could have been forever.
forever.
So 4 years pass, and then in 1812, the death of Dorcas Chase, Mary Ann's older sister. D-O-R-C-A-S. Dorcas.
That's
Dorcas.
unfortunate.
Dorcas, that is unfortunate. Dorcas had
Her
a...
brother Dingus.
Don't speak ill of the dead.
Very respectful. So Dorcas Chase, Mary Ann's older sister, had passed away in 1812, and it's rumored that she had committed suicide by starvation because of her father Thomas Chase's abuse. And She was also buried in a lead casket of cumbersome weight, and she was buried on July the 6th of that year. And once again, upon opening and observing the interior of the tomb, nothing seemed to be amiss. And then less than a month later, Thomas Chase himself, the patriarch, he died, and the cause was also thought to be suicide. And Thomas's remains were to be buried in a 240-pound lead casket that took 8 men to move into the crypt. And when they opened the vault this time, though, they noticed that something was definitely wrong. The two daughters' caskets, both made of very heavy lead and totally solid, had been strewn across the tomb like it was like they were child's things. A lot of people reportedly said they were like child's toys strewn aside.
I just got goosebumps.
And one was leaned up upside down against the far wall of the tomb. And yet Godard's casket remained untouched. So then the caskets were restored to their original places, and
After all of that,
wow. and entering the new casket of Thomas Chase, the tomb was resealed, and another 4 years pass. And then in September of 1816, an 11-year-old boy, Charles Ames, he passed away, and the tomb was reopened. And again, the coffins were discovered in disarray, including Chase's 240-pound behemoth casket, tossed aside like a child's thing. So by this time, there was a bunch of different rumors and stories going on in the parish that there was some haunting going on in this tomb, and people report screaming, and it's also attributed the mysterious death of a bunch of horses unexpectedly throwing themselves off a cliff and killing themselves.
Oh, wow.
Was due to this tomb.
That's creepy.
That's super creepy.
And hilarious.
That's the word I was going to say first.
So then, not even 2 months pass before the father of Charles, Samuel Brewston, dies. And before he's buried, the vault's examined from the exterior to make sure that nothing has disturbed it. And it's found to be both air and watertight. And yet when they open the slab, it's impossible that these lead caskets had been thrown about so violently that some of the caskets had even damaged each other, chipping away bits to where a skeleton's arm was hanging out of one of them.
Oh my God.
Like they're being thrown around.
Like they're being thrown around this room with no one being able to get in or out of this room. So they once again reset everything, put it back in, resealed the tomb.
Now, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results?
You nailed it.
In 1819, there was another burial that had to be in the same Chase vault, and it was this of Thomasina Clark. The then governor of Barbados was attending this burial and witnessed for himself what they found when they opened the slab. No one could explain it again.
Was it at this point when like everyone knew about this?
Everyone knew about this.
It sounds like a really good event for tourism. Let's see what happens when we pull back those slabs.
And all this happened in less than 11 years.
It's like Groundhog's Day with dead people.
So when they open it up again, of course, again, all of the coffins have been thrown around violently, and they're all strewn all over. And again, Goddard's coffin was untouched. So the governor, after they reset everything once again, ordered a thorough examination of this site. He wanted to solve this mystery. He wanted to calm the fears of the people in the surrounding parish. And so he had the men put down this fine white sand inside the tomb, all across all the caskets and on the floor. So if someone was to enter it, they would see footprints or some sort of markings that would show trace evidence that someone had been inside of it. And then he also had them mortar off the marble slab when they resealed the tomb, and he put signet impressions of his ring to make sure that if it was cracked, that they would be able to tell that the seal was broken. The accounts are a little bit off on this, but somewhere between 8 months and 2 years later, he gave the order out of sheer curiosity.
Yeah, of course.
Let's go see if we find some crazy stuff, guys.
So they went back down and they examined it, and the marble slab seemed untouched, and it seemed like nothing had been molested. The signet ring impressions were still there. He wanted further evidence, so he had them break the seals and open up the contents. And this is the creepiest part of all. So the 240-pound lead casket of Thomas Chase was barring the marble entranceway, upright, standing on end, as if to prevent anyone from getting in or out of the room. It took 8 men to move the coffin down so they could get inside and inspect what had happened. And again, all of the coffins, these very, very heavy lead caskets, had been thrown all over, and it even to the point where a corner had chipped off of Marie Anne's casket, and of solid lead, which implies an incredible amount of force. And yet, the white sand he had put down, there were no footprints, nothing else was disturbed in the room.
Spooky. Spooky.
So the governor ordered the room to be cleared, and they buried everyone else in individual plots in the cemetery parish.
That is really, really terrifying. And do you guys want to get out of the crypt?
Yeah, yeah.
I really do.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
We'll recap outside of the crypt.
That thing just moved.
Get out of
Okay,
here.
everyone get
Yeah,
out.
let's go.
Back away.
Everyone be safe from Fort Fritz. We love you all. Keep protesting, and we will see you next week. Be safe. Stay spooky.
Until next time, pleasant dreams.